All right. Well, at this presentation, we're going to talk about developing a grazing plan for your ranch. And this is another set in the presentation series that's been developed for the Sustainable Ranching Workshop. And this is the workshop that's a one-day part of the High Plains Ranch Practicum School. So we've condensed a lot of the material presented in the Ranch Practicum School, and are going to be delivering it in these Sustainable Ranching Workshops, these one-day schools. So I'm Dallas Mount with the University of Wyoming, and on the line with us we have Mike Smith, UW Range Specialist. Hello, Mike.
Hello, how are you?
Good, glad to have you with us. So Mike's going to make some comments as we go along here, keep me steered in the right direction, and add some things that might be pertinent as we go through here. So let's get into it. So I just wanted to again briefly mention the Ranch Practicum School. This is a school that's been going on since about 2007 in the southeast Wyoming, western Nebraska area. It's 8 full days. We run from June to January each year. We have about 20 to 30 students and involve 13 instructors. And Mike has been involved in that school before. You want to have any comments on that, Mike?
Oh, I think it's a really valuable opportunity to kind of get reoriented in terms of integrating your animal production and your range forage issues so that they really mesh like they should.
All right. Well, if you want more information on the school, our website's right there, and a lot of the resources that we'll be discussing today in this presentation are also posted on that website. So you might refer to that. So we're going to do a brief talk about the basic rules of grazing, estimating production, measuring annual impact, developing the plan, and long-term monitoring, and putting all these things together. This is an interesting set of photos here. This one here, I think, and Mike might know more about this, was from back in the 40s, and then this one here might have been mid to late 90s. And the idea to drive home here is we as range managers are really driving the forage production and the forage resource available in our environments to some extent. And this picture here exemplifies that. From changing grazing behaviors in a particular piece of ground, we can increase the forage production, or if we're making bad decisions, we can go the wrong way.
Yeah, this particular situation here starts out with the results of a long period of season-long grazing with fairly high stocking rates and the consequent results. And subsequent to that, we have the implementation of a fairly intensive grazing system, at least from the standpoint of public lands where this came from. And so reducing stocking rates, probably increasing the actual offtake from the standpoint of forages, but rotational grazing programs, so all of a sudden we heal up all of those really bad spots that are the things, the poster child for why we need good grazing management.
All right, thanks. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's talk about some of the basic rules of grazing. And some of these might be things you've heard before, but maybe we'll explain a little bit of the underlying ideas behind these. First thing I'd like to say, I guess, is the way I think about grazing management is identifying and managing for what you want. I know a lot of folks often talk about things and, well, I've got this plant that's a problem. Maybe it's cheatgrass you're trying to get rid of. Maybe it's another weed. And they're sometimes developing their grazing systems around getting rid of what they don't want. And I think maybe an easier way of thinking about that is managing for what you do want. And in that particular situation where maybe cheatgrass might be an issue, I think you want to manage for your cool season grasses. And in a lot of the area that we cover, cool season grasses are by far your dominant forage producers. And I'm going to make the assumption that one of the goals of folks listening to this call is managing for forage productivity. And if you want forage productivity, then you want a really nice stand of these cool season grasses. So managing for the health of those cool season perennial grasses is going to be one of the underlying assumptions, I guess, that I'm going to make as we go through this. But anything to add on that, Mike?
Well, most of Wyoming is going to be dominated by cool season grasses. You get the furthest east part of Wyoming, like around Torrington, there would be particularly sandy areas that have warm season grasses that might make up an important part of your forage productivity, and so you have some differences in the way you would manage the cool versus the warm season grasses, and it has to do with when they do most of their growing. If you're going further out into Nebraska, well, then your mixture of cool and warm season grasses becomes a little more even. So we're out in the sandhills, you might be about half and half. So we've developed the plan sort of according to that, to suit those needs.
Okay. So we're going to talk about managing for what we want. And here's some tools to do that, and some things to keep in mind is how you might impact those plants. And we're going to talk about these three aspects of it quite a bit today. The first one there is frequency. How often are you grazing those plants? And when we think about this from the perspective of a cool season grass, then when we think about frequency, I want you thinking about that in terms of when that cool season grass is growing. And there might be a pretty narrow window for that. Mike, when would you say most cool season, what's the window of growth for most cool season grasses in Wyoming?
Well, at the lower elevations in Wyoming, you probably start getting some green up in March. It may not be really obvious, but it's there, and then it really intensifies the growth rate in late April and May. And even in the Laramie Plains country, 7,000 feet, you're talking about being done by the middle of June as a general case. But the important thing is, over in the east, you got these warm season grasses, and so they really kind of fire up in May and are doing their thing on further out into the growing season.
All right. So we're talking about a period of time that maybe starts late March, but probably more reasonably starts sometime in April or May, and is pretty well over by about the middle of June.
Yeah, for most of us.
All right. So that's when we're thinking about frequency, and that's repeated grazings on an individual plant that would occur, and that plant would regrow and get grazed again. So that obviously is detrimental. We don't want to graze those plants multiple times in a growing season without allowing a significant opportunity for them to regrow. So we could talk about that. I'd say on most upland sites, on cool season grasses, the idea of taking more than one grazing is probably not a very valid idea. Would you agree, Mike?
Well, the thing about it is that they won't regrow once they shoot a seed head. So once you get what level of utilization you need, well, then you're about done. With warm season grasses, you might get another shower of rain sometime along, and they might green up some more or grow some more if they're still green.
All right. Well, let's cover some of these others. Intensity. A lot of folks have heard the term graze half, leave half. And while that may oversimplify it, I think it brings to light the idea of managing the intensity of the grazing. I know some research has shown that much over 50% utilization of a particular plant can be detrimental to it. But I think the idea of just keeping in mind that we want to manage our intensity or high intensity grazing over a number of years might be detrimental to a stand of plants. So intensity is a factor in terms of the health of that vegetation.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize that because the data seems to suggest that the actual percent utilization or intensity of use is probably the most important impact on plant health. And the long-term recommendation that comes out generally is that if you get more than a moderate level of utilization, which is going to fall somewhere between 40 and 60% on the key forage species, that's kind of your target. That's kind of the upper limit. And don't worry about utilization on some of those minor species because that's difficult to get. It's those key major species that you're really trying to manage.
All right. Thanks.